SMcKoy3, and the topic is the Harlem Renaissance. And of course, doctors, before we had our final commercial break, I think we promised that we would try to deal with the significance of the Harlem Renaissance. Certainly it was a very, very important and significant period in the African-American experience as well as in the American experience. But what can we learn from that, or what have we learned from that experience, and what do you see as the follow-up in a real sense of the Harlem Renaissance of the period, or is there a follow-up? Let's start with you, Dr. Smith-McCoy, and of course Dr. Gloria C. Johnson will give us some additional information in reference to that.
Okay, there are a number of parallels between the Harlem Renaissance and indeed the movements that followed it. And I think probably we should even go back before the Renaissance, because there, as we say, there was evidence of black letters prior to that, even beginning as early as Phyllis Wheatley in the 1700s. But the idea of language and how language is used to express a particular mindset or political state of being. If you look at what's going on in Paul Dunbar, for instance, Paul Laurence Dunbar, in that he has written in dialect, and indeed was prevented from writing in dialect from any other form other than dialect. But you take the dialectical writings of Dunbar, and you can move to some of the things that Langston Hughes, County Cullen, did with language in the Renaissance. And you can make very interesting parallels between that and what we see in present-day rap music, particularly since Langston Hughes was an advocate of the common person and looking at that common individual and common experience, not just the elites, which some of the talented 10th wanted to depend on after the Great Migration brought herds of formerly rural and uneducated people to the North, not just the talented 10th, but the common person. And so the rap movement itself is sort of based out of that sort of mindset that this is the art of an underclass that sort of reflects this idea of the world. And indeed, some of the parallels that you see having coming out with the idea of black masculinity or the place of women in political movements, and what does it mean to be black at all, are the same questions that we're asking today.
So these are just different questions applied at a different period. Is that what we're saying, Dr.
Right,
Johnson?
I think so, and certainly that's been thought about before. Around I guess it was about 54, it's about 30 years after his first dinner for through Opportunity magazine, Dr. Charles S. Johnson wrote an article about the Negro Renaissance and its significance, and he decided there that one of the important things that happened from the Negro Renaissance was that many of the people were still writing and still producing, but that at this point their art was being seen as part of a mainstream art, that things were being introduced into mainstream American writing. So he saw that as a positive thing, but that the kind of revolutionary race consciousness that had existed at the start of the movement had kind of died out. That then has been rekindled at other periods in our own history. For instance, in the 60s, we have what we call the Black Arts Movement of the 60s, where the whole concept of a black aesthetic was discussed over and over. And with Amiri Baraka, Don Lee, now Haki Madhubuti, Nikki Giovanni, many others talking about the dialectic between being black and Negro and what that meant. The changes in terms about what we called ourselves is very important then. So again, we go back to the language that Sheila was mentioning. So, and again, after that period in the 60s or so, which runs close to the 70s, I guess, we again see an emergence in what some of us are calling a new black aesthetic after the 70s, 80s writers and some of the present writers who are again asserting themselves and their right to do and write about what they want to write about and in the way they want to. And so back with Langston Hughes's statement, his article called The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, where he talks about the idea of the what the Negro artist was supposed to do, but he declares as a kind of manifesto for the younger writers that they will write about what they want to do, when they want to do it, and and how they want to do it, which became the kind of thing that the younger writers were very much involved in. But later, many of those same writers sought acceptance in mainstream writing as they grew older and became more established. So we see that kind of cycle in terms of development of literature, I think.
Dr. Smith-McCoy, I think over the last minute and 30 seconds we have, You mentioned the fact of these rap groups being a continuation of, in a sense, a continuation of something that was done during the Renaissance. Do you see them becoming a part of the mainstream in terms of African American literature, or do you think that they will always be on the outside of the mainstream of literature?
Well, I think rap has always been with us. We've just called it different things. If you go from, indeed, the dialect poetry to the last poets of the 1960s and the present-day incarnation of rap, you see that they've always been with us. And indeed, courses being taught right now using Tupac Shakur's poetry, being taught as poetry classes at California and at very outstanding universities around the country. Michael Eric Dyson has written a book, Between God and Gangster Rap. Houston Baker, a noted intellectual, has written about the politics of rap and looking at rap in its relationship to the blues ideology that preceded it. So I think it will always be with us.
Well, ladies, let me thank the two of you for coming by and just giving us that excellent information about the Harlem Renaissance. I think we know it primarily as an historical movement, but I think that the two of you have shed quite a bit of light upon the movement itself, that is, upon the literature and some of the authors and some of the other participants in that movement, and we certainly thank you for that. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.